inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
It's Saturday night and this is the Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes along with Albie Corner, Belinda DeLucy, Benjamin Butterworth and Alex Armstrong. Tonight on the show, net zero begins its demise of Britain. British Steel, it won't be the first, folks.
It appears too many young black men are drawn to lives of crime. I'm asking why.
We need to let refugees work so that they're not costing us a fortune in hotel bills.
the health of our royals is none of our business.
And religious prayer should be banned at schools.
It's 7 p.m. and this is the Saturday 5. Welcome to the Saturday 5. More chaotic, folks, than Tory efforts to pass their Rwanda bill. More rowdy than a Donald Trump election rally. More angering than a Gary Lineker tweet. We're here to bring you an hour of mayhem. As usual, I'm joined by agents of chaos, Albie Corner, Benjamin Butterworth and Queen Gammon, Belinda DeLucy. And to spice the pot even further, we're joined by special guest Alex Armstrong. Now, folks, you all know the drill. We each get a minute to outline our case, then the topic is thrown open to the group, and it's fair to say that we don't agree to disagree. And of course, we want to know your views as well, much more important than ours. Get in touch by emailing gbviews@gbnews.com. But before we start tearing each other apart, it's time for your Saturday night news with Aaron.
Very good evening to you. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB Newsroom. Norfolk Police has referred itself to the independent watchdog in relation to the deaths of 4 members of the same family on Friday. The force says it didn't respond to an emergency 999 call made about an hour before the bodies of a 45-year-old man, a 36-year-old woman and 2 girls were discovered at a house in Cossey near Norwich. All 4 were found with injuries. A speech by the Shadow Foreign Secretary calling for a ceasefire in Gaza has been interrupted by pro-Palestinian protesters. David Lammy had to make a quick exit when a Free Palestine Coalition activist jumped onto the stage and called for him to condemn what she called genocide in Gaza. Once David Lammy returned, more people in the audience stood up to launch verbal attacks on Labour's stance on the Middle East conflict. Mr Lammy says he wants to see a sustainable ceasefire.
The situation in Gaza is intolerable and unbearable. Too many children, women, old people have lost their lives. We need a truce now so that humanitarian aid can get in. We need a sustainable ceasefire. I'm hugely worried about what I'm hearing from UK aid agencies and from the United Nations and the medical attention that over 60,000 people who are now wounded or maimed need. We must get urgent aid in.
Mail deliveries on Saturdays could become a thing of the past as Ofcom looks at ways to reform the postal service. A spokesperson for the regulator told GB News they'll publish a document next week on how Royal Mail can evolve to meet changing consumer needs. Ofcom says it's ultimately up to the government, though, to decide if any changes to the service will be implemented. Tata Steel's pledged a £130 million support package to help workers retrain or find new jobs as it plans to close furnaces at its Port Talbot site. Up to 2,800 jobs will be affected over the next 18 months as the company transitions to what they say is a greener way of working. Unions warn the move will be devastating for the economy and the steel industry. Nicola Sturgeon claims the COVID inquiry does have messages she sent and received during the pandemic. On Friday, the inquiry heard all of Ms Sturgeon's communication on WhatsApp at the time had been erased. However, Scotland's former First Minister has posted that the inquiry does have messages between her and those she communicated with through informal means during the pandemic. Now, she previously said she never used informal messages to make decisions. Ms Sturgeon says she'll answer questions directly and openly when she gives evidence at the end of the month. This is GB News. We're live on TV, on digital radio and on your smart speaker too. Now it's back to the Saturday 5.
It's Saturday night and you're with the Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes and we're about to put the world to rights in just under an hour.
So now then, Darren, what have you got for us today?
Well, I'm going to kick us off with British Steel and net zero, Belinda, because you look at that Port Talbot skyline. Once the fiery heart of industry, now shivering under the icy gaze of net zero. Look at that view. This steel giant, once the pride of Britain, now feels the cold slap of what I call, folks, betrayal. The Labour Party, who should be fighting for the grafters, are instead choking industry with their green noose. It's no longer about the Welsh dragon, it's about currying favour with eco-elites and the Davos crowd. A dizzying flip-flop that even Houdini wouldn't be able to attempt. And as for the Tories, well, don't get us started. They're Labour in sheep's clothing. They've turned this net zero folly into law, ignoring the devastation that it wreaks on places like Port Talbot. They parade their climate agenda like it's some noble crusade, but in reality, it's a slow-motion disaster, with Port Talbot the unwilling martyr. But here's the stinger, right? As global tensions simmer from Ukraine's fields to South China Sea, Britain is now dismantling its own defences. Key strategic industries, such as making steel, were practically gift-wrapping those industries and sending them off to coal-guzzling giants like China and India. The Tories and the Labour Party, they're intoxicated with these green fantasies. If you ask me, they've totally lost sight of a stark reality. It must be the fumes from these new vegan foods that they're trying or something to that effect. Fairy tales of wind and the sun, right? You won't power a modern nation with those. You could cover whales in windmills and solar panels, but even then, you wouldn't be able to produce a single steel beam. As we hurtle towards this 2050 target, the picture couldn't be clearer in my view. Britain is now sprinting towards a colder, poorer future and outright industrial surrender. It's not just our lights at risk of going out, but the extinguished spirit of the British working man. And for what? A nod from the green vested interests. It's utter madness dressed up as policy. Now, Benjamin Butterworth, the Labour Party, your lot, they want to do all of this faster and harder. They would love it if we closed more of these energy-intensive industries.
I mean, as lovely as it was to hear your sort of low-rent jokes about vegans, it really was not related to the fact of the matter, which is that the Tata Steel plant is not making a profit. It's making quite a serious loss and has done for some years. Now, you, as a supposed flag bearer for the free market, can hardly claim that the government should be giving more money to a business that loses money. So what they're doing, I've not finished, what they're doing is going from a coal-fuelled furnace to an electric-fuelled furnace, which, yes, is much better for the environment and needs fewer workers, but also more likely to be a sustainable business. I think the only reason you're opposing it is because you're just obsessed with dismissing anything green.
No, you can only do the second part of creating steel. You can't do the first part, which is actually using the iron ore and coal to create the steel beams. You cannot actually create steel through the electric furnace.
So to clarify, you think a business that is losing a considerable amount of money and shows no signs of that changing should be propped up by the taxpayer for the sake of it?
I think that we should.
A yes or no will do.
We should have cheap and plentiful energy in Britain. We are currently, France and Germany...
Is that a yes or a no?
Pay far less for energy. That's the reason why it's not competitive and not actually able to make a profit, because of the energy bills that you hiked up, your lot, under Ed Miliband with the Climate Change Act back in 2008. So it started from there.
Darren, this is really nothing to do with net zero, and I actually think it's really despicable.
Oh, yeah.
Hold
energy
on.
bills going through the roof.
I think it is
Tell
despicable.
our viewers at home,
I
Alfie,
think
look them down the camera.
This is nothing to do. This is nothing to do
that their
with
energy
net
bills
zero.
are actually
It is
hunky-dory.
despicable that businesses are using the green agenda to essentially cut jobs and make more efficient business decisions. This, actually, Darren, is about capitalism, which is what Benjamin Butterworth was trying to say. You didn't answer the question. The only way that this Tartar steel plant could be profitable or in business is if the government subsidised it with subsidies. Is that what you think should happen?
It is doing.
But should it continue to do that?
But it's subsidising it by... It's giving
should it continue to have subsidies?
Yes,
it should continue to have subsidies.
Strategic industry should have subsidies.
All right, so that's fine. But the point is, this is not a profitable business. So the only way European and British steel can be profitable...
energy bills that your party have hiked up.
No.
Yes.
It's not because of energy bills.
Yes, it is.
It is because the cost of goods in the UK
please tell
is
me,
higher than in other parts of the world.
And, yeah, other parts of the world, because of the fact that we are going hell for leather with this green...
Sorry, this is getting ridiculous. Net zero nutters are a sandwich short of a picnic. This is beyond lunacy. The reason it's so expensive, the reason why they're losing money is because they have to jump through forever expanding hurdles to meet the green zealotry list of things you have to do to be green.
But
that's why they're going over to India.
It's not just to do with green.
No, but it is to do with green. You cannot say carte blanche. It's got nothing to do with the fact it's more expensive to produce anything in this country now and much cheaper to produce it in India.
But it has been for a very long time, Belinda.
Doesn't make it right, Albie.
I'm not saying it is
We are literally
right.
breaking the backs of the working class people in this country to fund a vanity project and hobby for the middle class people in Ivory Town.
I couldn't agree more. Well said, Belinda. But, Alex, I wonder then, if we look at the actual overall CO2 emissions of Britain, apparently Andrew Neil wrote in a column this morning that 1.5% of our overall CO2 emissions would be cut by the closure of this plant. 1.5%. Meanwhile, in 2023, China had its biggest coal output that it's ever seen. So what the hell are we saying to working class people in Wales? You're going to lose your job. Sod off. I don't care about you. But China, hunky-dory, happy days. We'll get our steel from over there at vast cost as far as CO2 emissions are concerned.
You've just nailed it, Darren, because it is at a vast cost, not only to the environment, which is what everyone's banging on about with this net zero nonsense, but it's at vast cost to British workers. What party is standing up and saying we need to protect British industry? You know, at the same time, we've got a war in the Red Sea. Hang on, Albie. We've got a tax on shipping through the Red Sea at the moment, which is our main shipping lane. So we can't even guarantee that we'll be able to get these resources into Britain. Not only that, we're talking up a war at the moment around the world. This is an absolute crisis. And where is Rishi Sunak? Where is Keir Starmer? Where are the two men who are head-to-head to lead our country?
But
They're
you
nowhere
often
to be
talk
seen.
about
The Tories have utterly betrayed the working-class people. They promised they would protect. And the working-class people of this country in the Red Walls gave their votes to the Tories because they believed under Boris that they would be given it.
It's like sitting next to Arthur Scargill. I mean, honestly, you would have sat here in the 1980s...
Margaret Thatcher would be turning in her grave.
Exactly, saying that Thatcher shouldn't have closed the mines.
Exactly.
The fact is... No, I'm speaking, Alex. You've had your moment. You've had your moment.
It's a different point in time, isn't it? We can't just say that the 1980s are the same as they are today. We are about to head into a bloody Third World War. I mean, let's wake up.
The world moves on. This is an inefficient business, and the way to guarantee some of those jobs staying is to move with the times, make it cleaner, make it more sustainable. And actually, when the government is paying hundreds of millions in perpetuity to keep this business going, then you don't have money for houses or for healthcare that needs to be helped by the government.
I don't get these arguments. They're so
You
Alex,
think,
let me ask Benjamin
you
a quick
think that the
question.
taxpayer should
Benjamin,
pay for a failing
do you
business?
think it's safe and wise for the UK to be the only country in the G20 who won't be able to produce steel from scratch? In terms of future conflict, in terms of being a self-sufficient nation, do you think it's wise to only focus on economics of today and not think forward to the future, that maybe we need to be self-sufficient in
The flaw in
steel?
your argument is that clearly we're not buying steel from Tata in Wales because it's too expensive. We're already
Why is
getting
it too expensive?
We're
Because they have
already
half the
getting
prices
it
to
from the
make the
rest.
green
We're already getting it from the
Benjamin.
rest of the world. The question is whether you pay it out of taxpayers' pockets for a failing business. And I'm sorry, call me a Thatcherite, Belinda, but I think that's a bad idea.
All right, OK. But
Rude
I'll tell
day.
you, folks, I think this is only the beginning, but we shall see. Up next, though, it's Albie. Albie, how are you going to beat that one?
Well, I'm going to try my best, Darren. Look, earlier on this week, we saw the full extent of the crimes committed by a group of people who we call the Rolex Rippers, who have stolen now almost £4 million worth of luxury watches from the streets of London. Now, it's impossible not to state the obvious when we look at these images of the perpetrators. Most of them are young black men, and it brings me absolutely no pleasure at all to state that fact. We've got to ask the question, why does it appear that so many young black Brits are drawn to lives of crime? I am sick and tired of seeing images strewn across the press of young black men who are either victims of awful knife crimes, perhaps they've been murdered, or they've committed crimes themselves. I think it's absolutely awful, and I want an end to it. I've been mugged several times in my life. Each and every time I've been mugged by fellow young black men. I've also spoken to many other people about muggings that they have experienced, and 9 times out of 10, they have been mugged by young black men too. Now, we know from statistics that over 50% of gun crimes, robberies, and other serious crimes have been accused against young black men. But we do also know that actually when a lot of these cases go to court, more than double of those cases brought against young black men are thrown out of court over young white men. So perhaps there is some injustice in the system. But we've got to ask the question, why is this happening so much? Is it because we're not funding public services properly? Is it because of poor housing? Is it because of the way that young black men interact with institutions like education and policing? Or is it something else? Is it because of institutional racism, the left might say? I say, what else could it be? Is there something more fundamental about the black British experience which leads to poor life outcomes? Family structures, single-parent backgrounds, inner-city culture. We know that about 70% of criminals come from single-parent backgrounds. I am from a single-parent background. Not all young black men from single-parent backgrounds are involved in crime or victims of crime, but too many are for my liking, and we need to do something about it. If I can make a plea to the young black men of my generation, it would be to say, please, let us not make the same mistakes that too many of our fathers have made. Do not abandon your children, because I think this is key to ending the overrepresentation of young black men in the criminal justice system. Now, Alex Armstrong, what do you make of all of this?
Look, I totally applaud your statement, and I don't think there is enough young black voices, or just black voices in general, who are talking about this issue openly. We see a lot of the institutional racism, the slavery card being played quite a lot as excuses.
What do you mean the slavery card?
For example, someone will say that I can't get a leg up in life, so therefore I turn to crime because actually the world is institutionally racist, which goes back to slavery. We know that card is played quite a lot. And frankly, I think there needs to be a deep introspection in the black community, and we see it here in the UK, we see it here in America as well, where I think the community needs to come together and start holding itself accountable. And I'm not saying that this is just a black issue, because it's not, actually. It's lots of other lower income ethnic minorities have the same problem too. But they have to really start at a community level if we're going to address them. So I really applaud you for saying that. You know, first of all, it's quite brave, because I know you're going to get a lot of stick from other young black people who disagree with you and may agree with the points that I raised earlier. So, look, from a man who's from a single-parent background as well, it's a very, very hard start to your life, but that's not how it has to be. And there are equal opportunities for everyone in this country, I believe.
Benjamin Butterworth, David Lammy got criticised for saying something very similar to me, essentially saying that fatherlessness in the black community is a contributing factor to the high crime rates that we see in the black community. Do you think that criticism was fair?
I think that it's not as simple as the fact that they're raised in single-parent households. I think it's the lack of respect that a culture where fathers think it's OK to run off, to leave their responsibilities. Should it be a surprise that young black men take that as an acceptable way to behave, not necessarily simply the fact that they're in a single-parent household? But I think, first of all, I don't think I've ever heard in this country, some black 19-year-old that's gone to prison for something blaming slavery. I think that's a very American sort of argument. But what I would say is that I think socioeconomics has a lot to do with this as well, because it is still a much higher proportion, and of course saying black community is a very broad thing because they come from lots of different parts of the world, but the black community still has much higher rates of poverty. Obviously that will be related to a single-parent household, and I think a lot of those that are falling into lives of crime they're not from well-off or middle-class black families. The economics is a strong correlation. The other thing I would say quickly, unless you want to come back.
But 57% of black Caribbean families and 44% of black African families are headed by single-parent households, and yet we see the crime statistics in those communities that we see. Do you not think there's a pretty inexplicable link between those two
There's
things?
a strong correlation across all races between poverty and turning to crime, and it doesn't justify it, but clearly it's one way to help. The final thing I was going to say is that I think the police have a responsibility on this to try and be more inclusive of the black community, because you get these people that from the outset don't want anything to do with the police, don't help the police go about their work. And a journalist called David Wood, who's the crime correspondent at the Times, a former colleague of mine, he is a black man of our age, and he wrote about how he had constantly been stopped and searched since the age of 16, despite being from a very middle-class family in St Albans, being an exemplary member of society, and that had made him feel very fearful and uncomfortable about the police.
But you have nothing to hide. I mean, if you're not carrying a knife,
you been
it shouldn't be a
stopped and
problem. I have
searched?
actually been stopped and searched once at an airport. I thank you very much, Ben.
In an airport?
Yes, at an airport.
We're all searched in airports,
No, before
Alex.
I got through the gates, Benjamin. No, the point I'm trying to make is this: you can blame the police and you can say it's the police's fault for doing their job, and actually,
But often they're not
we've
doing
seen
their
knife
job.
crime go up when they don't do stop and search. So let's be honest that it is an issue relating to that community. The reality is that there's a glorification of crime in the black community. There's a glorification of it through music. There's a glorification of it through drugs and other misdemeanors as well.
I want to bring in.
I will say that we do need that. The community needs to stop glorifying this as a lifestyle, because it has become a lifestyle for a lot of
Yes,
black
it
men.
has become a lifestyle for lots of people. But Darren, on the stop and search question, yes, black people are more likely to be stopped and searched by police, but we also know that the conviction rates after people being stopped and searched for black people are lower. So is it just a case of stop and search reform, or is there something more that the community itself needs to do?
I mean, I read that actually a lot of police officers are saying that they're too scared now to actually stop a black person on the streets.
It is happening more. It is happening often, though, Darren. Stop and search is happening to young black
if you ask
men.
me,
They're 5 times more likely to be searched if you're black.
Because
So you think the solution is stop and search?
I do think stop and search is a really important tool in the police's armoury.
More so than family structure?
No, I think family structure is important, but I don't think you can turn around and say, oh, I'm from a fatherless home, so obviously a life of crime is right for me. That's just actually giving people victim narratives. I'm from a working class, single-parent family. I haven't gone around stabbing people or nicking their phones,
What do we do, Belinda, to keep families together?
Well, sorry, very briefly. So Alex mentioned America. Really important studies have been done. In the 1950s and 60s, there were huge amounts of strong black families. In fact, more black women were married than white women. 9% of black children came from single-parent families. Now, up to now, in 2023, it's now 56%. What has gone wrong? Is it because of the colour of their skin? No, it's welfare, welfare, welfare. It has replaced fatherhood in a way that is absolutely stealing from children's lives. They are paying fathers basically not to take their responsibilities of their children. But I would say that everyone, no matter their background or colour, is responsible for their own crimes. No excuse, not even this structural racism stuff. You go to jail if you commit a crime.
All right, now Belinda's going to be coming back with more on the royal family, asking if they should be more transparent. And Alex Armstrong's going to be discussing prayer bans in schools. Next up, though, it's Britain's wokest man, Benjamin Butterworth, and he wants to discuss channel migrants and ask, should they be given the right to work in the UK? You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in a world exclusive, my Mark Meets guest is one of the survivors of the 1972 Uruguay plane crash in the Andes, where they resorted to cannibalism to stay alive. It's now a hit Netflix movie. We're live at 9.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5 Spicy Start. Richard's written in, and Richard says the move to net zero will be a disaster economically and will raise huge political problems between nations. War is a likely result. The arguments for net zero are based on results from computer models. These aren't always accurate and, worse, are tuned to give the results that the authors want. Steve says if only we used British steel in our infrastructure and stopped using the second-class alternative from China, we would be working at a profit. Slightly more expensive, but the money would be saved because it will last longer. And then David says on Albie's point, your guest is correct. Often single-parent families lack role models and lack discipline. Well, there we are. Thank you for your views, as ever. Benjamin's up next. Benjamin, what have you got for us?
Well, speaking of lacking discipline, it's me. Now, this week, today, it's been revealed that 16,000 Channel migrants have been given permission to work while waiting for their applications to be processed. The number has risen considerably by about a third because the number of people waiting more than a year sitting in hotels in this country to have their refugee applications processed has gone up tenfold. Now, some people say, like Nigel Farage, that they shouldn't be allowed to work. But you know what? I strongly disagree. We pay these migrants about £49 a week, as well as the considerable cost of their hotel stays. And what use of that is it to us when they're in this country but not able to contribute to their costs? The fact is that we know £49 is clearly a measly amount to survive on. So many of these migrants are already working in the black market doing cash-in-hand jobs. I think the Home Office has had the right idea, even if it did try to hide this amount. Because if they earn more than 49 quid a week, they have to pay that towards the cost of their hotel accommodation. Now, when it's costing us hundreds of millions of pounds, I say we're better off letting these refugees work in short-staffed sectors than we are having them living off the taxpayer. So it shouldn't be a third of Channel migrants getting visas to work. It should be 100%. Now, Darren, what do you make of that?
Well, I think actually you've basically started off the show by saying you don't give a damn if working class people lose their jobs. And now you're turning around and saying you don't mind if migrants who don't have a right to be here, who are here illegally, can undercut their jobs as well.
First of all,
is there anything you like about this nation? Horrible, spiteful left-wing politics. This is what you represent.
Look, first of all, the fact is that they've only been given visas to work in areas of the economy that have serious staff shortages. So there is nobody available to do those jobs. So, for example, picking fruit, an area that's important in rural parts of this country, that's put up the prices of lots of fruit since we left the EU. They go and do those jobs. Taxpayers aren't paying the hotel bill, and they're contributing so we can afford food. What is wrong with that?
Perhaps you missed the point where they are actually carers as well. They're being pushed into the care sector. How would you like it if your elderly grandmother or grandfather was being looked after by someone who we don't even know their identity or what their background is? It's bonkers, isn't it?
I think these people coming and doing those jobs should be admired. Look, the vast majority of them dearly want to work and contribute and build a life in this country. And they're also
Where is your evidence for that statement?
Because they work, Darren, because they do the jobs that no one in Britain will do. Look, I think this is a sensible, from a small state Conservative perspective, because we don't want people relying on state benefits. I don't understand also why a policy which was introduced in 2005, which was reviewed by Theresa May's government and Boris Johnson's government, and they both decided to keep the rules as they are, is being discussed today as if it's something new.
I hate this lazy Brit argument. It really annoys me because there are absolutely tons of young children who'd love to go into these sectors, but you know what it is?
We don't really support child labour.
Cheap labour coming from abroad that's driving the wages down so that it doesn't make them an attractive job to do.
Belinda, Benjamin says we don't want more child labour. Well, we don't want slave labour either, do we? He wants to pay people pittance.
I don't know what Benjamin's talking about when he's saying, you know, we'll alleviate the British taxpayer. We're still paying for them.
Yes.
We're still paying for their bed and board, and they get to keep their wages. These are men we have no idea.
That's not true.
Well, at least some of it we do.
If you listen to the monologue, you'd know that.
We do still pay for bed and board. They don't pay for everything as soon as they earn. They get to save some of their money. Facts.
If they earn more than the 49 quid they'd get in benefits, then in order to keep it, that has to go to towards their accommodation.
Now,
these bills are hundreds of millions.
Benefits, but I don't believe their hotel is paid for. They don't pay.
They have to pay towards it
from the state.
No, I'm not sure that's correct.
It's
in the Daily Telegraph.
To send out to the world, it's basically saying everyone disaffected, the hundreds of millions of people who are disaffected, come to England. The big fat dangling carrot the Tories are already dangling have just gilded it. They have just said, come over, no deterrent. They are liars. The Conservative Party are liars.
It's been a policy since 2005.
But they've lied about it. They said they'd do everything to stop the boats. They said they would put in deterrents. They are lying.
Albie, you also have to admit that people like yourself and Benjamin, who are saying that, yes, come over to the UK, come over here illegally, you'll get a job.
That's not what I'm saying.
Well, that's exactly what you're saying.
That's not what I'm saying.
You are part of the problem for people crossing the channel and dying. You're part of that problem.
Let me finish. What I'm saying is let's make the most of a bad situation. I want the Rwanda plan to work. I want a deterrent to work. I want the channel crossing to stop. But with the migrants, with the migrants who are already here, Alex Armstrong, I think they should be put to work and contributing to the economy.
And let's just say the reason that the number of people given work visas has gone up is for twofold. One, the number of people waiting over a year for their case to be processed has risen tenfold. And secondly, we have more serious shortages in various sectors. So when you say they're taking British jobs, no British person was applying applying for those jobs. So the alternative is that we have British businesses struggle and our prices go up.
No British person is applying for those jobs because you are saying to every Tom, Dick and Harry around the globe that they can come in and undercut their wages.
No.
That's why.
Cut the rhetoric.
Exactly.
No one was doing those jobs. We have serious shortages
Because
in areas
of the
like
pay.
care and fruit
Exactly,
picking,
because they are paid
agriculture.
a pittance. That's why.
Right, so Darren,
why
would you
are they
still-
paid a pittance? Because of your
Would you
immigration
still oppose
policies.
it if the wages that they were paying these migrants were equalised to British wages rather than the 80% that it is?
I would still oppose it because they are not meant to be here, Albie, and they shouldn't.
But they are here, so what do we do with
And
them?
just quickly to Benjamin's point, anyone from the left who's supporting mass migration are giving the Tories a free pass to fail their own workforce, make working conditions terrible and wages low. That's you supporting the Tories' failures to invest in their own people.
Right. Still to come tonight, Alex Armstrong's going to discuss whether Catherine Burble Singh, the strictest head teacher in Britain, was right to ban prayer rituals in a school. But first, Queen Gammon Belinda de Lucy wants to discuss the royal family and is asking you actually to keep your beak out. You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. Cheers very much for your emails. Maria's written in, and Maria says, I strongly object to some of the panel saying single-parent families contribute to crime. Myself and 4 of my friends have brought up our children without fathers, and none of them have turned to crime. Emily says, wow, the only thing I can say to Benjamin is you're living on another planet. Well, it's not the first time I've heard that one. The reality is most of the migrants are already working illegally anyway. Why would you offer to declare yourself as working and have to start paying board at the hotel and lose your asylum allowance? I definitely wouldn't want an undocumented person looking after my nan. Now, Peter says migrants should be allowed to work in the UK if they have not thrown their passports away, but not if we do not know who they are. A range of views, thank you very much for them. Now, Belinda's next. Belinda, what have you got for us?
Well, the media at the moment is awash with speculation as to what caused the Princess of Wales to suffer abdominal surgery so serious it has led to a 2-week stay in hospital and months out of public view. It may be in the public interest to know if a senior royal is ill, but I don't believe they should have to disclose their diagnosis. Many illnesses can be deeply distressing, and having it splashed across media against their wishes could impact recovery, impact the children involved, and even the anxiety of the nation. Our monarchy is the physical embodiment of our flag. It is the only thing that stands between us and a sleazy, celeb cringe politician representing our country. They may not be perfect, but I believe it's our duty to form a ring of protection around our future Queen when she is suffering, not blame her for NHS waiting lists or fuel rumours of her diagnosis. And as for the bloodhounds determined to find out or disclose her illness, remember, it wasn't long ago that 2 pranksters invaded Kate's privacy while she was in hospital with morning sickness by tricking a nurse into passing their call to her room. And the nurse ended up taking her own life. Royals are still human beings. They deserve dignity and privacy over intimate health issues. So back off all you curious cats and leave Kate be. Now, what do you think? I'll go to you, Darren, about...
I actually do think that people should... when you find out something like the future monarch, whether it be the future monarch or the current monarch, is ill, the monarch represents the nation, right? The monarch is the crown, the head, the figurehead of our nationhood, of our symbols and all the rest of it, who we are, what we represent. And I think to find out that they are mortally ill or dying or wounded or whatever else it might be, and God forbid it be any of those, by the way, but we don't know, right? We're purely speculating. But George VI, when he was ill, and that's Queen Elizabeth II's father, they didn't go around saying, oh, we must find out. Actually, there was a sort of... it was a forbidden...
But the press is quite different now, isn't it?
Very much so, but I don't think...
And we're a less deferential society. I actually take a different view. I do think that countries like America, where their head of state, their medical records are available to everyone, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. And I also think it was very good that King Charles said that he was going to hospital for a procedure for enlarged prostate, because it's a problem that lots of older men suffer from, and I hope that it leads to lots of older men getting their prostates checked out, because prostate cancer is a leading cause of death for older men. So I do think there can be merit to the medical records and the medical ailments of our head of state being made public, because it can encourage better behaviour among the people.
What if they have young children, though, who, if they see all these media buzzes and headlines about how ill and sick their parent is, because Kate has very young children, Charles does.
Well, I'm talking about the head of state, and also the children would already know that their parent was unwell, wouldn't they? So I imagine the princes and the princess will know what is wrong with their mother.
But is it not part of the whole mystery of the crown, and the Queen did this so beautifully, is what made her so special, that they don't publicise their private lives? And there's been enough of that in the media and in books and whatever else lately. That's that mystery of the crown that makes it so special. I mean, we also have lines of succession for a reason. If there's an ill monarch, then we have the next one take over. I think that's what it's all about. And you can't really compare a president who's elected by the people to represent them and pass policies and all those things. It's a little different.
The head of state.
But it's a little different.
I mean, look, the policy hasn't changed from Queen Elizabeth II. We were always notified when she was in hospital or anything, and it was utterly terrifying every time, which you don't quite get now. But what I'd say is that, first of all, it comes this idea that we own these people, that because they are constitutionally in charge at some point, that we have an ownership over every aspect of their life, which I find slightly uncomfortable. But I would point out that in 2009, Andrew Marr famously asked Gordon Brown, who was said to be unwell at the time, I think it was largely untrue, whether he was on medication and what medication he was taking. And it was very widely condemned. Andrew Marr was criticised for asking the Prime Minister about his private health. And so we don't have a culture of expecting to know this about our elected politicians. And so maybe it's quite unfair that they feel they have to tell us these private details.
Well, and also when the Queen was ill, I mean, she may have had blood cancer or something like that for years, but we don't know. But it wasn't put out there in the papers because I think it would have given the country a kind of anxiety to have constant, headlines about the sickness of our state, head of state.
Just one quick point, which is you talked about the nature of the media has changed. I think in reality, especially in the age of the camera phone, all the rest of it, the idea that they could go to hospital, that they could disappear for 2 weeks without anyone noticing is for the birds, and it would fuel speculation and conspiracy if we weren't told.
Yes, and I mean, in the American context, right, you don't have to be told that Joe Biden is a bit past it, right? You can just see it's obvious. And I think it's an interesting one, but then the other point, the main point, isn't actually about the head of state. Belinda was talking about Kate, the Princess of Wales. Should she tell us why she's in hospital?
Look, my point is about the head of state.
Yeah, I
think for less important roles, it's probably not as relevant as for the head of state. I was making direct comparison between the US president and the king or the queen of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and I think it is probably right that the king or queen, and when Kate is queen, that we do have an understanding of the health of our head of state as other countries do. It's not abnormal in the 2020s for that to be the case.
Right, answer that question then, each of you. Should we know what Kate is in hospital for?
Do you know, when I saw the details, it made me feel a bit uncomfortable because, I wouldn't want other people knowing that about me. But the fact is, their health and survival is essential to our constitution, so I think pragmatically we should.
No, I think it's all a bit off.
100%, yeah, 100%.
And I obviously agree
100%, no.
with that
I think that there are some intimate and deeply, embarrassing sometimes illnesses.
Okie doke, folks. Now, still ahead this evening, Alex Armstrong's going to ask if Michaela Community School head teacher Catherine Burble-Singh, who makes my heart sing, by the way, was right to ban prayer rituals on their school premises. You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. It's been a spicy show, so your emails have been flying in. Johnny's written in. Johnny says, why aren't community leaders doing something within these communities, he's talking about the black community, to stop perpetuating the story and association of black being the perpetrators of crime and violence? It's a bad bunch, not the majority, and this is making life difficult for law-abiding members of said community. And basically all your emails on the Royals are essentially saying, keep your nose out of business that ain't yours. And I think that's fair enough. Now, Alex is going to finish things off this evening. Alex, tell us what's been on your mind.
Well, now, a school in London has had their best headmistress, and one of the best headmistresses, actually, in the UK, Michaela School, it is. She's the strictest headmistress, but now she's being taken to court. Wonder why? It's to do with wokeism, isn't it? And more radicalism in our primary schools, as we keep seeing almost weekly in the UK. Now, Miss Birbal Singh, who is one of the best-rated headmistresses, and has done so by getting her students against wokery, by getting them in their uniforms, ties up when they get into school, no more flags other than the British flag being woven in the playgrounds, and banning religious prayer, most importantly. A Muslim pupil, and more likely to be their parent, by the way, is now taking her to court to overturn that ban, saying it's their religious freedom that she is ruining. But her work speaks for itself, doesn't it? Her work speaks for itself. Her school is one of the best-rated schools in Britain, and that's because it's banned all this nonsense. It's focused on what is important in school, and that is education. Miss Birbal Singh says that by removing religious prayer and for everyone having to sacrifice something, you create cultural cohesion. Who would have thought it? Now, if we compare that to another school in East London, Berkeley Primary School, where radical Palestinian activist parents have shut it down now since December, where the kids haven't had an education for 2 months, you can see the stark difference. Those poor teachers in that school are getting death threats, they're getting racist phone calls, and there's even a bomb threat being sent into the school. So when we have a head teacher, like Mrs. Birbal Singh, who parents, by the way, sign a document saying that they are allowing their children to abide by all of these rules, so they know what they're getting into before they go to the school. When we have a great headmistress like that, and we allow them to be taken to court over something so simple, shouldn't we just ban religious prayer and ban this religious nonsense altogether? We cannot allow radical religious groups like this small sect of Islamists to run our schools as they have been doing across the country. We saw it not only last year with LGBT education in some schools being completely stopped and the schools being absolutely barred from entry. We must get on top of this absolute nonsense wokery. We've got to get on top of this radicalism and then do something great, ban religious prayer in schools and make it fair for everybody. Now, Albie, what do you think about this sort of ban?
Look, I think you've got to be careful when you're calling Muslim parents that want their children to practice Islam Islamists. I think that you've got to be careful when you say that. But my point would be, look, I think it's probably right in a secular school for kids not to be allowed to leave lessons and go and pray. But what I would say is, I would suspect that you disagreed with the ban on prayers outside abortion clinics. And isn't it a little bit inconsistent to say you're pro-prayer ban in this secular school instance, but anti-prayer ban outside abortion clinics?
I see the radical Islamist bit. I'm mostly referring to the school in, I think it was Bradford or somewhere, that was shut down because they were teaching LGBT education.
Well, those making threats as well, they are extremists. They are making
If
you are threatening someone, a teacher, because they're not allowing prayers, then I'm sorry, but you are.
Look, I just think we've got to be careful when we throw around the word Islamist. But on the second point about the abortion clinic prayer ban, which I support, you, I presume, if I'm right, would not support that, but you do support a prayer ban in this context. How can both be right?
Well, I don't think people being sort of intimidated outside abortion clinics is a good thing, because people have abortions for different reasons. So I do think there should be some consideration as to what goes on outside.
Should there be a prayer ban?
Well, I haven't really thought about what, and I don't think it's a really big issue.
We can tell you haven't thought about it.
Well, I haven't thought about prayer ban outside of an abortion clinic, but I've certainly thought about what the impact of it happens in schools, and it causes division, and we actually
I don't see how they're comparable.
Look,
well, it's a prayer ban, that's why it's comparable.
I think the issues of parents being aggressive and using illegal levels of threats against teachers in a school is clearly unacceptable. The question here at this free school in Brent is that 30 pupils were praying in the playground. There is no prayer room for them to do it privately. Now, there's no suggestion that they would come out of lessons to do that, and that wouldn't be OK if it were. But I find this difficult because, first of all, there is no contradiction between good discipline and well-behaved kids and wanting to privately pray maybe twice during the school day. They pray 5 times a day generally, I think, Muslims. And so I think it's wrong to conflate those. And the fact is that, you know, I went to a secular secondary school which would have Christian prayers during the day. It would reference Christian hymns. And so I doubt you'd want to ban that. I think every other school can have Muslims happily there. Why can't this?
I think it's a faith school. He's talking about it.
No, I didn't go to a faith secondary school, and there were plenty of references to Christianity.
Yeah, but the issue we have is that we live in a climate at the moment where our authorities and people in government are scared about criticising or scrutinising one particular religion. And we see that anyway. You know, you can absolutely tear to shreds Christianity, but people don't have the same courage when they want to openly and publicly scrutinise Islam, for example. Now, I've spent a lot of time in Muslim countries. I have fantastic conservative Muslim friends who have said to me many times, what is going on in the UK? Why is there such a soft touch to Islamists who demand that the country changes for them? And we do have...
Can I just clarify?
There have been threats... Let me finish. I'm just talking for 30 seconds. Please, men. These Muslim children are being threatened by the more extreme Muslims. It is Muslim children that are being threatened. My Muslim friends hate the radical Islamism. In my opinion, radical Islamism is akin to Nazism, and because it's an issue in this country,
that's very different.
We need to make rules that they are absolutely forbidden to force schools, to threaten schools to change them for their needs.
I think it's deeply offensive to suggest that Muslim kids wanting to privately pray, as is their religion, is in any way equivalent to extremists or terrorists. You wouldn't say to an Anglican or a Catholic school that those kids that express their Christianity are akin to Christian terrorists. That is pure bigotry. Bigoted Belinda.
Thank you very much to our guest tonight, the wonderful Alex Armstrong. Next up, it's Leo Kearse's Saturday Night Showdown. I tell you, it won't beat this one. Cheers for watching.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst. Welcome to your latest GB News weather. It's turning stormy over the next 24 hours or so. Storm Isha moving in from the Atlantic, bringing some heavy rain and strong and damaging gusts of wind across the UK. We can see it there later Sunday into Monday, high isobars across the whole of the UK. Met obvious warnings in force. A wet and windy evening to come as well, as this band of rain slowly pushes its way eastwards, though starts to ease during the early hours. Rainfall totals, combined with some snow melt as temperatures rise across western areas, could lead to some localised flooding issues, but generally for everyone, breezy conditions and high temperatures means a frost-free start to Sunday, but generally fairly cloudy. There'll be some brighter sunny spells, particularly across towards central southern parts of the UK and perhaps northeast Scotland. But then Storm Isha moves in, outbreaks of heavy rain pushing in to the north and the west of the UK. Winds picking up by the afternoon, gusts of 50, 60, locally 70 miles an hour could lead to some disruption. And then through Sunday evening, overnight into Monday, the band of rain pushes eastwards, which will be heavy, and then some really strong and gusty winds affects northern Scotland. Amber warnings out across many northern and western parts of the UK, perhaps southeast England also seeing some very strong winds. It stays blustery into Monday, further heavy showers, and then turning very wet and windy again as we move into Tuesday. See you soon.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark